It's a tense May morning in the Coral Sea. Aboard the USS Sims, Captain Wilford M. Hyman scans the horizon, eyes narrowed against the rising sun. His ship and the oiler, Neosho, have been detached from the larger force to refuel. The sea is calm, the mission routine. However, the quiet doesn't last. In the distance, a formation of enemy planes emerges, low over the waves. Hyman's heart races. His ship, unprepared for battle, is about to face overwhelming odds. He shouts orders as the crew scrambles into position. The sky darkens with enemy bombers. The attack is imminent. On the morning of May 4, 1942, Fletcher's task force had launched an airstrike on Tulagi, but despite a decent effort, the results were underwhelming. After striking Tulagi, Fletcher retreated south at high speed, evading Japanese retaliation. Admiral Fitch's Task Force 11 and Crace's Task Force 44 spent almost 2 full days bridging the 250-mile gap and joined Fletcher's Task Force 17 on May 5th, reuniting the forces without much happening in between. The carrier plane's unimpressive strike against Tulagi was enough to catch the attention of the Japanese, who swiftly responded. Alarmed by the presence of an American carrier, Admiral Takagi, commanding the carrier striking force, along with a strong escort, began operations to hunt down and eliminate the threat in the Coral Sea. For 2 days, the opposing fleets scoured the Coral Sea without making contact, coming alarmingly close to each other on May 6th. Takagi's carriers were not flying patrols that morning. On that day, a Japanese land-based search plane successfully identified Fletcher's location. But the critical intelligence failed to reach Takagi in a timely manner, having been routed through Rabaul rather than delivered directly. The forces came within a mere 70 miles, yet both remained unaware of their proximity. As night fell, Japanese forces, with Admiral Goto aboard the light carrier Shoho, began advancing toward Port Moresby, while Takagi temporarily withdrew to the east, refueling his ships aboard the heavy cruiser Myoko. The following morning, Fletcher and Takagi dispatched their search planes once more, scanning the Pacific for signs of the enemy. Fletcher was positioned 150 miles south of Rossell Island, situated between 2 Japanese forces, Sadamichi's invasion force to the north and Goto's main force to the northwest. Meanwhile, the Japanese carrier striking force was approximately 300 miles southwest of Tulagi, around 200 miles southeast of Fletcher, who mistakenly believed the Japanese carriers were south of Bougainville. While Fletcher's scouts were scanning, he divided his forces once more. He directed Crace's group, comprising the Australian cruisers Australia and Hobart, the US cruiser Chicago, and 3 American destroyers northwest to block Japanese forces at Jomard Passage. Fletcher believed that neutralizing the Japanese forces in a carrier battle would allow Crace to contest any further Japanese advances. This maneuver meant that Crace's ships would operate without air cover, a risky position, while Task Force 17 would be deprived of 30% of its anti-aircraft firepower. Meanwhile, the elements from Yorktown and Lexington shifted northward to engage the enemy carriers. Fletcher's decision to detach Crace's squadron has faced scrutiny for undermining his fleet's defenses, with some suggesting it stemmed from anti-British and anti-Australian bias. Fletcher's staff chief claimed the detachment was motivated by a desire to ensure that only American officers received medals. While this seems unlikely, evidence suggests Fletcher favored separating Crace's squadron, influenced by discussions about Crace's preference for independent command. While this was ongoing, by 7:36 a.m., a Japanese pilot sighted the tanker Neosho and her escort, the destroyer Sims. Fletcher had moved the valuable and nearly empty oiler, Neosho, affectionately nicknamed the Fat Lady, and the destroyer Sims out of the danger zone the day before, after refueling his carrier. The American vessels were ill-prepared for any kind of battle. Eager to deliver good news to Takagi, the Japanese pilot mistakenly identified the pair as an aircraft carrier and a cruiser. The report aligned perfectly with Commander Chuichi Hara's assessment of the Americans' potential location. This erroneous report sent a ripple through Takagi's command. Armed with the false intelligence, Takagi ordered an all-out attack. At 8 o'clock, the Japanese launched almost every plane from their two carriers. By 8:15, an aerial force of 78 aircraft was mobilized, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Takahashi Kakuichi. From Zuikaku, 37 aircraft were deployed, 9 Zeros, 17 Vals, and 11 Kates. Shokaku committed 41 aircraft, including Takahashi's Val, 9 Zeros, 19 Vals, and 13 Kates. Aside from the 12 Kates on reconnaissance flights and 19 Zeros retained for combat air patrol, every operational aircraft was committed to this strike. Upon reaching the reported coordinates, just after 9 o'clock, Takahashi discovered only an oiler and its escort. A broader search of the surrounding area yielded no additional targets. He halted the attack and requested clarification. Based on earlier scout reports, Hara informed him that an oiler and destroyer had been spotted near the carrier force. To ensure thoroughness, the strike leader decided to split his formations. He kept the dive bombers within sight of the oiler, while sending the torpedo bombers and escorting fighters to search for the carrier group. It took only minutes for the detached torpedo bombers to cover the 25 nautical miles to the northwest, only to find an empty ocean beneath them. While this absence of a target did not conclusively indicate that there had never been a carrier force in that location, the report was now an hour and a half old. It became increasingly clear to the Japanese commanders, from Admiral Inoue down, that the southern contact reported by Shokaku's scouts was likely a misidentification of a small replenishment group. Takahashi continued to search for non-existent American carriers despite receiving orders to return. Finally, at 11:15, he ordered the Zeros and Kates home, over 2 hours after spotting the Neosho and Sims. He then directed 36 Vals to attack these support vessels. Aboard the US ships, the Japanese had not gone unnoticed. Neosho, commanded by Captain John S. Phillips, had first detected enemy aircraft at 7:40, observing multiple planes approximately 10 nautical miles to the north-northeast. Phillips misjudged the aircraft as friendly, believing he had been sent to a location secure from enemy interference, and thus did not report the sighting to Fletcher's task force. Sims was equipped with air search radar, noticing the approaching larger Japanese force. Yet, at 9:35, when 15 enemy aircraft appeared briefly before disappearing from sight, or at 9:53 when another 7 Japanese planes were observed, neither Sims nor Neosho reached out to Fletcher's task force. On both occasions, Sims did open fire with its 5-inch dual-purpose main battery against the enemy aircraft. These flew at high altitude, and Sims failed to score any hits. 20 minutes later, the situation escalated. At 10:35, 3 bombers dropped 3 bombs simultaneously. The Neosho swung hard right to avoid being hit. All bombs fell to starboard and were near misses. Captain Phillips finally reported to Fletcher that he was being bombed. However, there was little Fletcher's task force could do, except anxiously await the results of the battle, as both ships were beyond the reach of any US planes. At 11:26, the Vals initiated their assault on the oiler and destroyer. The defensive fire from both ships was minimal, offering little protection as the enemy planes approached unopposed from the north. The situation quickly escalated into chaos, with the crew of Sims trying their best to evade the bombs. The initial wave, consisting of 15 bombers, failed to inflict damage on the 2 vessels, which were deftly maneuvering. Observers noted approximately 24 enemy planes advancing. The ships continued firing, altering their courses in desperate attempts to avoid the dive bombing strikes that rained down from both fore and stern. The timeline of the assault, as recorded by Sims's senior surviving Chief Petty Officer, Robert J. Dicken, indicated that within 10 to 15 minutes, the focus of the attack shifted entirely to Sims. The Vals strafed and bombed the Sims, which was positioned behind and to the left of the oiler. At 12:05, a near miss rendered the destroyer's gyro compass inoperative, and just 4 minutes later, she suffered a direct hit amidships, resulting in a violent explosion and flames erupting from the vessel. The precision of the Japanese assault was striking. At approximately 12:15, a bomb struck near the after torpedo tubes, penetrating the deck and exploding within the aft engine room. The force buckled the deck, while additional hits compromised the ship's structure, damaging critical systems and forcing personnel to evacuate the bridge. Sims was overwhelmed. Dickin, now acting on instinct, organized a rescue effort, abandoning ship to swim to a whaleboat where he began to collect personnel who had fallen into the water. As sailors were departing the destroyer, a barrage of 3 550-pound bombs struck home. The first struck the second torpedo mount, detonating in the forward engine room. The second exploded in the aft engine room after hitting the upper deck, while the third obliterated the fourth naval gun. In under a minute, the destroyer was torn in half, rapidly sinking, claiming the lives of dozens of crew members. A sailor who had been cast into the water recalled seeing the captain, Lieutenant Commander Wilford M. Hyman, standing stoically on the bridge, riding her down like one of the captains of old. Moments later, a massive explosion sent the remnants of the Sims 10 feet into the air, leaving behind only 68 survivors. The remaining dive bombers then turned their focus to Neosho. They straddled her, strafing and bombing the limping ship. Their bullets tore through the tanker's deck and hull, igniting a torrent of flaming fuel across its deck. One of the Japanese pilots executed what is believed to be the first kamikaze attack of the Pacific War, crashing into Neosho's fourth gun station, or its stern. Japanese pilot Hori Kenji later recounted the moment, describing how his classmate, Shigeo Ishizuka, was struck while diving, bursting into flames before crashing into the bridge of the oil tanker. Throughout the assault, Neosho endured an astonishing amount of damage, suffering 7 direct bomb hits from 250 kilograms bombs. Each strike further compromised the vessel's integrity, creating significant breaches in the hull and leading to oil flooding the engine room. Notably, the combination of being mostly empty, filled primarily with air, and the crew's experienced response helped to avert an immediate disaster. Despite the destruction, the ship's machine gunners continued their desperate defense, even as 2 of them were instantly killed, one decapitated by flying debris. Captain Phillips remained on the bridge, issuing orders to flood the after magazines and extinguish the flames ravaging the deck. As the last of the Vals departed, an order by Phillips to prepare to abandon ship led to confusion. Miscommunication ensued, causing many crew members to leap overboard, believing the order to abandon ship had already been given. Phillips ordered the launch of 2 motor whaleboats to recover survivors from the water and the life rafts. Although the conditions at sea were rough, the officers in command worked to gather as many men as possible, prioritizing the injured while neglecting to tow the life rafts back to the ship. As sunset approached, the boats returned filled to capacity with survivors, many suffering severe injuries. Phillips was left with a severely damaged ship, listing 30 degrees to port, aflame, and devoid of power. The crew continued battling the raging inferno on board, using flood valves on several starboard wing tanks in a desperate attempt to right the vessel. The sky quieted down again. The attack had lasted 18 minutes. The battle claimed between 180 and 235 lives from Sims, and another 179 from Neosho. For Takagi, the cost had been minimal, sources conflict, but he likely lost between 2 and 6 planes. However, he had lost valuable time. In preparation for abandoning ship, all classified materials, including sensitive cipher documents, had been destroyed. This precaution meant that when the vessel did not sink immediately, and the engineers managed to power up a small gasoline generator, the subsequent radio transmissions were sent in plain language. One crucial message misrepresented the Neosho's position, reporting it as 15 nautical miles north and 30 nautical miles east of its actual location, hindering rescue efforts by misdirecting searching vessels. It wasn't until May 11th that the destroyer Henley finally located the battered oiler, rescuing 123 survivors before sinking the wreck with torpedoes. Neosho and Sims had unwittingly absorbed the blows meant for larger targets, allowing Admiral Fletcher's carriers to remain untouched. Yet Fletcher faced a different problem. He had not yet located the Japanese fleet. The operation had been a disappointment, Takagi's forces had spent the morning hunting secondary vessels instead of the elusive American carriers. Hara received another report 45 minutes after Takagi's aircraft were dispatched. A Japanese float plane from the cruiser Kinugasa accurately reported the presence of an American carrier and several other vessels to the southeast of Rossel Island. Among them, a correctly identified Lexington-class carrier. As Takagi's strike force raced toward the wrong target, Admiral Goto received even more reliable intelligence. At 8:20 a.m., one of his scout planes pinpointed the exact location of Task Force 17. Yet despite the clarity of the report, Goto found himself constrained. His air strength was too limited to mount an offensive, and his primary mission was to safeguard the Port Moresby invasion force, which was now only 30 miles away. Finally, at 10:42, Takagi ordered the fleet to reverse course. 9 minutes later, Hara conceded, instructing the strike group to return, admitting the earlier target, the tanker and destroyer, had been mistaken for a carrier. This was frustrating to Takagi, Hara and Goto, but what was severely worrying was that the Japanese scout plane correctly identifying Task Force 17 reported empty carriers. This meant the task force was likely in the process of launching its own strike against the Japanese. Because around that same time, a breakthrough seemed imminent for Fletcher. A reconnaissance plane from Yorktown had reported 2 enemy carriers and 4 heavy cruisers 225 miles to the northwest. Convinced he had found Takagi's main fleet, Fletcher immediately ordered a full attack. One of the first major engagements of the Battle of the Coral Sea was about to break out. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.